It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon when I walked into my cousin's wedding. The hall was decorated with elegant flowers, sparkling lights, and the soft sound of music filled the air. Everyone seemed to be in a good mood, laughing and chatting, ready to celebrate. I felt a little nervous, but also excited. After all, it had been a while since I saw most of my relatives, and I was eager to reconnect. As I entered the venue, I spotted my parents already chatting with some of the guests. They didn't notice me at first, so I decided to make my way to the buffet table. While I filled my plate, I could feel the eyes of the other guests on me, which made me uncomfortable. But I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I was just being paranoid. The ceremony started, and it was beautiful. The bride looked stunning in her white dress, and the groom couldn't stop smiling. Everything was perfect. But then, things started to take a turn. After the vows and the speeches, the reception began, and that's when the chaos started. I noticed that my parents seemed to be avoiding me, and it made me uneasy. It wasn't like them to be so distant, so I decided to go over and say hello. "Hi, Mom, Dad," I said, smiling as I approached them. They looked up at me, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, without any warning, my dad started talking in a tone I didn't expect. "You know, it's embarrassing to have you here, acting like everything is fine," he said, his voice louder than usual. I could feel my face turn red with embarrassment. All of a sudden, I felt like I was the center of attention, but for all the wrong reasons. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I had no idea what he meant by that. "You've wasted so much time, and look at you," my mom chimed in. "You're still struggling to figure out your life. We thought you'd be doing so much better by now. But instead, you're just here, doing nothing. It's honestly a disappointment." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and it seemed like everyone around us was listening in. It was like the whole room had gone silent, and all eyes were on me. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I was doing the best I could, but the words just wouldn't come. All I could do was stand there, frozen. "This wedding is a reminder of what we expected from you," my dad continued. "And honestly, we're ashamed. Look at your cousins. They're successful, and then there's you." His words stung like a slap across my face. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My parents, the people who were supposed to support me no matter what, were tearing me down in front of everyone. I felt my chest tighten, my eyes start to burn, but I fought back the tears. I didn't want to cry in front of anyone. The worst part was that my relatives didn't step in to stop it. Nobody said anything. They just looked away or acted like they hadn't heard. I wanted to disappear. The humiliation was unbearable. I turned and walked away, trying to hold my head high. But inside, I felt shattered. By the time I left the wedding, the only thing I could think about was how small and insignificant I felt. My parents' words echoed in my mind, and I wondered if they were right. Was I really a failure? Did they have a point? I tried to shake it off, but the sting of their criticism stayed with me long after the wedding ended. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I couldn't believe how my own family had treated me, how easily they had humiliated me. But deep down, I knew after the wedding, I didn't want to face anyone. I didn't want to talk about what had happened, and I certainly didn't want to explain myself to anyone. For days, I stayed at home, avoiding calls and messages from my family. My phone buzzed with texts, but I ignored them. The last thing I wanted was to hear more about how disappointed they were in me. I spent most of my time in my small apartment, staring at the walls. It felt like everything in my life was going wrong. The more I thought about it, the worse I felt. My parents' words played over and over in my mind, like a broken record. "We're ashamed of you. You've wasted so much time. Look at your cousins." Every time I tried to push the thoughts away, they came back even stronger. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe they were right. There were moments when I would try to focus on my work, but even that felt pointless. I had been trying to build a career for years, but it seemed like I was always stuck in the same place. No matter how hard I tried, it never felt like enough. And now, with my family's harsh words still fresh in my mind, I couldn't help but wonder if I was just fooling myself. I spent hours scrolling through social media, looking at posts from people I went to school with. Many of them seemed to be living the life I had always dreamed of. They had good jobs, fancy vacations, and perfect relationships. It made me feel even worse about myself. I felt like I was falling behind, like I had missed my chance to be successful. Seeing everyone else thriving just reminded me of how far I still had to go. The jealousy and self-doubt were overwhelming. One night, I even started to think about giving up on my dreams. Maybe I wasn't cut out for the life I had always wanted. Maybe my parents were right, and I was just wasting time. I found myself questioning everything. My career, my choices, my future. I began to think that maybe it would be easier to just accept my reality and stop chasing something that seemed so far out of reach. But then, something changed. I don't know exactly when it happened, but I realized that I couldn't keep living this way. I couldn't let my family's words control me. They didn't know everything I was going through, and they didn't understand the challenges I had faced. I knew I couldn't change their minds overnight, but I didn't want to let their disappointment define who I was. So, I made a decision. I would stop wallowing in self-pity and start doing something about my situation. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew it would take time, but I couldn't let fear and doubt hold me back any longer. I had to take control of my life and prove to myself that I was capable of more than what they saw. The next day, I got out of bed earlier than usual. I decided to focus on my work, even if it felt like I was getting nowhere. I didn't expect results overnight, but I knew that every small step would bring me closer to where I wanted to be. I started researching new skills, reaching out to people in my industry, and setting small goals for myself. It wasn't a grand plan, but it was a start. The first few days were tough. I had to push myself to keep going, even when I didn't feel like it. But slowly, I began to feel a spark inside me, a tiny flickering flame that told me I wasn't a failure. I was still capable of achieving something. I just had to keep moving forward, one step at a time. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time since that wedding, I felt a sense of determination. I knew that my family's words wouldn't be the end of my story. It was only the beginning. After a few weeks of pushing myself to keep moving forward, I started to realize something important. I wasn't going to find success by sitting around feeling sorry for myself. If I wanted to change my life, I had to take action. It wasn't just about proving my family wrong anymore. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of doing something great. One afternoon, while I was working on a small project, I took a break to grab a cup of coffee. As I sat in my kitchen, staring out the window, I had an idea. Maybe it was the frustration from everything that had happened, or maybe it was just the desperation to do something different, but something clicked inside me. I remembered a time years ago when I had a dream of starting my own business. At the time, it felt like an impossible goal, so I pushed it aside. But now, looking out the window, I realized that maybe it was the right time to try again. I didn't have a big plan, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I remembered a few things I'd read about turning a passion into a business, so I decided to give it a shot. At first, it felt crazy. Who was I to think I could run a successful business? But then I thought back to that wedding day. My family had doubted me, but I couldn't let that stop me. It was time to prove to myself that I could make something of myself. I spent the next few days researching. I looked up everything I could find about the type of business I wanted to start. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and there were a million things to learn, but I wasn't scared anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt excited about something. I wasn't just dreaming. I was taking action. I started small. I took on a freelance project just to get my feet wet. It was a simple task, but it felt like a big win. I worked late nights and long weekends, putting everything I had into it. Even though it wasn't a huge amount of money, the feeling of actually creating something was priceless. I was finally doing something that felt like mine. The first few weeks were tough. There were moments when I wondered if I had made the right decision, but I kept going. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about the way my parents had spoken to me at the wedding. I didn't want to let their words hold me back anymore. I was determined to show them, and myself, that I was more than just a disappointment. Slowly, things started to improve. The work kept coming in, and my confidence grew with each new project. I knew I still had a long way to go, but I could feel myself getting closer to something bigger. The more I worked, the more I realized that this was what I was meant to do. It wasn't about proving my family wrong anymore. It was about building something that was entirely my own. But even as my business started to grow, I couldn't forget how I felt at that wedding. The shame, the embarrassment, the feeling that I wasn't enough, it still lingered. I had made a lot of progress, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to face my family again. They hadn't apologized yet, and the thought of seeing them still made me uneasy. Part of me wanted to rub my success in their faces, to show them that I had done it on my own. But another part of me just wanted them to see me for who I was, without all the judgment. I knew I couldn't keep avoiding them forever. Eventually, I would have to face them. But for now, I focused on my work. I was finally creating a future for myself, and that was enough for me. I didn't need their approval to keep moving forward. I was on my way to something better. After weeks of working hard on my freelance projects, I began to see real progress. I felt more confident, more in control of my life than I had in a long time. Each new project brought more opportunities, and with each one, I learned more about my craft. It was challenging, but every small win pushed me closer to my goal. It wasn't just about the money. It was about proving that I could create something from nothing. One morning, while sipping my coffee, I got a message from a potential client. It wasn't a huge project, but it was a step forward. They were interested in hiring me for a job that could help build my portfolio. It was the kind of project I'd dreamed of, but I didn't expect to get it so soon. I took a deep breath and accepted. I spent the next few days completely focused. I wasn't going to let this opportunity slip through my fingers. Every moment of the day, I was working, learning, and improving. The deadlines were tight, but I didn't mind. I loved the feeling of being busy with something that mattered. I also realized something important as I worked on this project. I didn't need to wait for everything to be perfect. I didn't need to wait for some big break to get started. I just had to take the first step and keep moving forward, even if things were still a little unclear. This project was a small step, but it was the kind of step that could lead to something bigger. As the days passed, I put all my energy into the work. I wasn't thinking about my family or the wedding anymore. I was focused on building something that would last, something that would make me proud. There were moments of doubt, but each time I felt unsure, I reminded myself of how far I had come. I was no longer stuck in that cycle of negativity. I was in control now. The project eventually wrapped up, and I sent it to the client. They were happy with the results, and even though I didn't get paid a lot, the sense of accomplishment was priceless. I realized that it wasn't just about the money. It was about the experience, the growth, and the fact that I was building something real. It felt good to be doing something on my own, without relying on anyone else's approval. A few days later, I got another message. This one was even better. It was from a larger company, offering me a more significant project. My heart raced as I read the email, but this time, I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. I'd worked hard, and now the effort was paying off. I replied quickly, eager to take on the challenge. This was it, the kind of opportunity I had always dreamed about. It was proof that my hard work was starting to pay off. I spent the next few weeks working on the new project, learning even more and pushing myself further. It wasn't always easy, but it felt right. I was building my business, step by step, and each project brought me closer to where I wanted to be. I could see the results of my efforts. My confidence was growing, and so was my portfolio. One night, as I sat at my desk, Looking over the progress I'd made, I realized how far I'd come. Just a few months ago, I had been at my lowest point, humiliated at a family wedding, wondering if I'd ever amount to anything. Now I had a business that was slowly but surely growing. It wasn't perfect yet, but I was on my way. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. The road ahead was still long, but I knew I was on the right path. And that first step, the decision to stop feeling sorry for myself and start working hard, was the moment everything changed. As the weeks went by, the work started coming in faster than I expected. Each project felt like a stepping stone, building up my portfolio and confidence. The first few jobs had been small, but now I was landing bigger and better opportunities. I could hardly believe how quickly things were changing. It was like I had finally unlocked a door that had always been closed to me, and now there was no going back. One of the first big projects I landed was for a well-known company. They reached out to me after seeing the work I'd done for smaller clients. I remember the feeling of receiving that email. It was the kind of opportunity I dreamed of, but never thought would come so soon. I immediately accepted, excited but also a little nervous. This was a real test, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. As I worked on the project, I realized how much I had learned over the past few months. I was no longer the person who doubted herself at every turn. The skills I had developed were finally being put to good use. I spent late nights working, making sure every detail was perfect. I didn't want to disappoint my new client or myself. This project was bigger than just another job. It was my chance to prove that I could succeed. The more I worked, the more confident I became. I realized that the fear I once felt, fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, was slowly fading away. I was no longer working just to make a living. I was working to build something real. And the more I focused on the work, the less I thought about the negative things my family had said. Their words still stung, but they no longer had the power to stop me. As my client's project came to a close, I felt proud of what I had accomplished. The feedback I received was positive, and the client was happy with the results. Not only did I complete the job successfully, but I also built a new connection in the industry. This was the kind of momentum I had been waiting for. It was proof that my hard work was paying off. The word started spreading, and soon I had more inquiries than I could handle. I was getting more offers from people who had heard about my work. Each new project was another chance to prove myself, and I didn't want to waste any of them. As the months passed, my small freelance side job grew into a real business. I hired a few people to help, and together, we started taking on even larger projects. It felt surreal to see my business expanding, but I was determined to keep pushing. What amazed me most was the shift in how I viewed my work. It no longer felt like a side hustle or something I was doing to make ends meet. It felt like my passion, something I was proud of. I woke up every day excited to work, knowing that each day brought me closer to the success I had once only dreamed about. During this time, I realized how much I had changed. The person who once walked into that wedding, humiliated and unsure of herself, was now building a future that she could be proud of. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And that feeling was worth all the hard work and late nights. There were still moments when doubt crept in, but they were fewer and farther between. I knew that the road ahead would continue to have challenges, but now I was ready for them. Each challenge was just another opportunity to grow, and I was determined to keep pushing forward. The momentum was building, and nothing was going to stop me now. A few months into my growing business, I had reached a place where things were moving smoothly. I had a steady stream of clients, and the work kept coming in. There were challenges, of course, but I had learned to handle them better. What I hadn't expected, though, was that my success would bring me back into contact with my family. It all started one quiet afternoon when my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from my mom. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. I hadn't spoken to her since the wedding, and I wasn't sure how I felt about hearing from her now. The words from that day still echoed in my mind, but I knew I had to at least read the message. "Hey, sweetie, I hope you're doing well. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to reach out. Your dad and I have been thinking about you a lot lately. We're sorry for the way we spoke to you at the wedding. We were wrong to say those things, and we realize how hurtful they were. We love you, and we're proud of everything you're doing. Reading the message, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to forgive them instantly, to just let go of the past and move forward. But another part of me was still hurt. Their words had left a lasting impact, and it wasn't easy to forget how they had made me feel. I didn't know how to respond. After thinking about it for a while, I decided to take a deep breath and reply. Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the apology. It hasn't been easy for me, but I'm glad to hear you're proud of what I'm doing. It's been a tough journey, but I've learned a lot. I wasn't ready to dive into a full conversation yet, but I wanted them to know that I was willing to move forward. I wasn't holding on to the anger anymore, but I still needed time to process everything. The days that followed were filled with mixed emotions. I was still focused on my work, but a part of me couldn't shake the thoughts about my family. I wondered what had changed for them. Why had they reached out now? Had they seen my success and felt guilty? Or was this their way of trying to reconnect? I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the same person I had been months ago. The girl who had been humiliated and torn down by her family was now standing tall, proud of the life she had built on her own. I had learned to rely on myself, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from me. The next few weeks passed by quickly, and my business continued to grow. I took on more clients and began expanding my services. I even hired a few more people to help manage the increasing workload. Things were moving in the right direction, and I couldn't have been more grateful. Then, out of the blue, my mom called. I wasn't sure if I was ready to speak to her, but I knew I had to. After a few rings, I picked up. "Hi, sweetie," she said, her voice warm, but a little unsure. "I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. We've been so impressed by everything you've accomplished." Her words were kind, but there was still a part of me that felt unsure. It was hard to just jump back into a relationship with them after everything that had happened. But I listened, and we talked for a while about my work, my plans for the future, and even some of the projects I was excited about. It wasn't the easy, carefree conversation I'd hoped for, but it was a start. I realized that while things couldn't just go back to how they were before, I could move forward. I didn't have to forget the past, but I could choose how to let it shape my future. As the call ended, I felt a sense of relief. I wasn't carrying around the same weight of anger or disappointment anymore. I had taken control of my life, and no matter what happened next, I knew I was strong enough to handle it. A few weeks after my phone call with my mom, things started to feel like they were finally falling into place. My business was thriving, and the personal space I had created for myself was giving me the peace I needed to keep moving forward. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. Then, one evening, I got a message that caught me off guard. It was from my cousin, Emily. We had been close growing up, but over the years, we had drifted apart. We weren't in touch often, and I wasn't expecting to hear from her. "Hey, I hope you're doing well. I've been following your journey from afar, and I just wanted to say I'm really proud of you. I know things were tough at the wedding, but you've really turned things around. I'd love to catch up sometime." My heart skipped a beat. Emily was always the family favorite. She was the one who seemed to have it all together. Perfect grades, perfect job, always on top of everything. When I saw her message, it stirred up some old memories. I thought about the wedding again, about how everyone had gathered around her and prayed for success, while I was left standing in the shadows, feeling like I didn't belong. But instead of letting that old resentment take over, I decided to reply. I wasn't that person anymore, and I didn't want to hold onto the past. "Thank you, Emily. That means a lot to me. I've been focusing on my work, and it's been a crazy but rewarding journey. I'd love to catch up, maybe over coffee sometime." A few days later, We met at a cafe in the city. When she walked in, I noticed how much she had changed. She was still the same Emily, confident, successful, but there was something softer about her now. Maybe it was the way she smiled, or maybe it was the fact that we were both no longer trying to prove anything to anyone. We spent the next hour talking about everything. We talked about our childhood, our families, and the struggles we had both faced in the years since we last saw each other. It was refreshing to finally speak openly with someone who had been a part of my life growing up, even though we had both been through our own challenges. When the conversation turned to the wedding, I couldn't help but mention it. I didn't want to dwell on it, but it felt like the right time to talk about what had happened. You know, I said, that day was really hard for me. I don't think anyone really understood what I was going through. Emily looked down for a moment, then met my eyes. I had no idea, she admitted softly. To be honest, I didn't know how much pressure you were under. I just thought you were upset for other reasons. It hit me how little we had all understood each other back then. We had all been so focused on our own lives that we never stopped to consider what anyone else was going through. And now, sitting there with Emily, it felt like we were both finally seeing each other clearly. I'm sorry, she said after a pause. I should have been there for you. I didn't realize what was happening. But I'm really proud of you. You've done something amazing with your life, and I'm glad to see that. I didn't expect her apology, but it meant a lot. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about finally understanding and forgiving it. I smiled and nodded. Thank you. I appreciate that. Honestly, I've learned a lot from everything that happened. I'm just glad to be where I am now. As we finished our coffee and said our goodbyes, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Reconnecting with Emily had been unexpected, but it reminded me of how far I had come. It wasn't about the past anymore. It was about the future, the person I had become, and the person I was still becoming. I left the cafe feeling lighter, ready to face whatever came next. The past had shaped me, but it no longer controlled me. Now, it was time to focus on the future, and there was nothing holding me back. Months passed, and my business continued to grow. Things were better than I had ever imagined. I had built a reputation for myself, and people were starting to take notice. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I had a team now, and together, we were tackling bigger projects and creating work that made me proud. Every day felt like a new opportunity, and I was determined to make the most of it. But even with all the success, a part of me knew there was still something missing. I had worked so hard to get to where I was, but I hadn't fully faced the people who had doubted me. My family, though they had apologized, had never really been a part of this journey. I was proud of how far I had come, but part of me still felt like something was left unresolved. One day, while working in my office, I received a call from my mom. It had been a while since we spoke, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I picked up the phone, and her voice was warm, but there was something in it that made me pause. "Hi, sweetie. I've been thinking a lot lately," she said. "Your father and I want to come visit. We'd love to see you and talk about everything." I took a deep breath. I had always been the kind of person who avoided confrontation, who preferred to let things go rather than face the difficult conversations. But this time felt different. I had grown so much, and I knew that it was time to face the past head-on. I didn't want to keep carrying the weight of old wounds. "Okay," I replied, my voice steady. "Come visit. I think it's time we talked." A few days later, my parents arrived at my apartment. The air was thick with unspoken words as we sat down together. There was an awkward silence at first, but eventually my mom broke it. "We're really sorry for the way we treated you at the wedding," she said softly. "We were wrong, and we regret not supporting you in the way you deserved." Hearing those words, after everything I had been through, felt like a relief. It wasn't about them erasing the past, but it was the acknowledgement that they understood the hurt they caused. It was the kind of apology I had needed to hear for a long time, but never expected to receive. "I appreciate that," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. It hasn't been easy, but I've learned a lot from everything that happened. I'm proud of what I've built, and I'm finally in a place where I feel at peace with myself." My dad, who had been quiet up until then, spoke up. "We're proud of you too," he said. "We've watched you grow, and we see how hard you've worked. We may not have understood it all before, but we respect what you've done." In that moment, I realized that the past didn't have to define me. I had spent so much time feeling like I had something to prove, not just to my family, but to myself. Now, sitting there with them, I understood that I didn't need their approval to move forward. I had already proved everything I needed to prove, most importantly, to myself. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about our lives, about the challenges we had all faced, and how much we had all changed. It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it was a step toward healing. I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but I felt ready to face it. The past no longer had the power to hold me back. As my parents left that evening, I felt a sense of peace. I had come full circle, from the girl who felt humiliated at the wedding to the woman who had built something incredible on her own. It had been a long and difficult journey, but I had finally reached a place where I was at peace with myself. Looking back, I could see how far I had come. I had found my own strength, built a successful business, and healed the wounds of the past. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that the future was mine to shape.